Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Nobody Investors. This show is a great chance for us to meet people who've been involved in Nobody Studios from the very beginning, who heard our story, that were inspired and felt like that they could be part of something bigger. Today, I'm going to be joined by the fantastic Niti Nadarajah, who's one of our earliest investors and was brought to us by the fantastic Seychelles. But before we dive into all of that, let's say hello to Niti. Hi, Niti. How you doing?
Hi, so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're delighted to have you not only as investor, but just on this show. And it's also another special day. It's Australia Day. So you're dialing in from Australia and you've joined us on this. So it's always nice to have a little bit of a theme to go with our shows. So thank you very much for doing that.
No worries.
So you've been involved in Nobody now for some of the earliest times, but you also have like a fascinating background, and I love people who have this sort of non-linear approach to their career and their life, because I think that's what Nobodies are pretty much all about. I don't think I've met anyone who had like the perfect way that they achieved anything. So can you share with folks a little bit about your own background and some of the twists and turns in your career, which I think has been fascinating to what you're doing today?
Absolutely. So I trained and qualified as a lawyer about 2 decades ago now, which seems like a very long time ago, and have been a lawyer ever since. And then probably over the last few years, just started exploring, I guess, different sides of myself and found myself talking more about things like gender equity and racial equity, and finding a real passion in some of those discussions and topics, which then led me to, get more involved in organizations that were really trying to make a difference in those areas. And so as I did more and more of that, I started to realize that actually I'd been missing out on something my whole career. And I was like, this thing seems to be filling this void that I've kind of felt has always been there. That little void that sort of says, is this all I'm going to ever do? Am I going to wake up in 20 years' time or 10 years' time, whatever it is, and say, that's what I did with my life, And I sort of started realizing, okay, there's something here. I've got to work out what it is, and I've got to try and make it a part of my life more holistically. And so that's what I've really been trying to explore and do over the last year, is just kind of lean into this space. So I left corporate employment and decided to start my own thing. So started 2 businesses, because why do things by half?
Of course, exactly.
But so I'm doing a bit of legal freelancing, which is kind of my, I call it my security blanket, right? It's kind of that thing that helps keep the lights on. It's still something I really enjoy. I really enjoy doing it, but I didn't want to do it full time. And so I'm doing that part time. And then I've got a whole bunch of other stuff going on, which is essentially coaching. So really working with women, which is kind of my sweet spot and my passion area, to help them get unstuck like I did from their careers. And, that doesn't necessarily mean moving into, solopreneurship or entrepreneurship. It could, but really just helping people to find that joy, that spark that you can bring into your life, whether it's a full-time thing, a part-time thing, volunteering. I mean, who knows what it is, right? So that's what I'm doing now, and it's been amazing. And, Nobody Studios came along, I think about a year ago. I think Sejal started talking to me about it, and it was exciting because it just felt like it fit with everything else. I'm big on inclusion, and the idea of Nobody Studios just kind of spoke to that sort of, passion for inclusion that I have.
Yeah, well, there's so many great things I think about your own personal story that exemplify what we want Nobody to be about, right? For many people, they often might even look at their career having some of those feelings you're describing, and have invested like a lot of time, right? Like lawyer school, last time I checked, wasn't that cheap, and it's a big investment in time, right? And it's sort of this moment to sort of say, I'm going to take a different direction from putting
Mm.
like a lot of time, energy into something, which you obviously, as you said, you still care deeply about. But to do something different it's a sort of brave choice, and maybe a bold decision, I think, which really exemplifies a lot of what we believe in the studio too, as well, right? Like how to support people to do that, I think is so admirable. And then, but this other point as well of, you're saying you're not a solopreneur, but I'm going to push you and say I think you're doing an amazing job at it, right? Like backing yourself to start something that is aligned to your passion area and like to turn it into a business. I know you're a very humble person, but that's, again, it's admirable to sort of go for that, right? To sort of be audacious enough to say, you know what, I'm feeling this is something that needs to be, I need to explore. I need to go
Mm.
after it, and backing yourself is amazing. But you also have done it really systematically, which again just resonates with our philosophy of like, creativity and science together, where, yeah, right, I can use my skills that I have invested and built a lot of time around litigation and legal services to give me this base to sort of experiment with in my new domain,
Mm.
which again is a great way of managing risk as an entrepreneur, right? It's a systematic approach, if you will, as I would interpret it, to what you're doing, and because so many people never try. they're they
Mm.
they get locked in, or they feel like they've almost like a sunk cost fallacy to the investment they made in themselves to be, in your instance, as you described, a lawyer, and they live with this feeling of never going after that sort of feeling inside them that there's something more. And this for me is exemplifies what Nobody is about, right? Creating a space where people can explore their intellectual curiosity, where sure they can still have a day job and put a few hours a week into the companies, and try and turn them into, or explore them and see what they turn into. Is there an opportunity to fully transition to them? So for me, you sort of best exemplify that behavior in just your daily life. So can you tell people just a little more about how you managed to sort of make that transition a little bit? Like,
Mm.
what gave
Yeah.
you the confidence to sort of back yourself? Because again, I think that is a behavior we believe in a lot in Nobody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are a few things there that are really key. So one of them for me was definitely this idea of not throwing all my eggs into one basket, because that really scared me, right? Like the idea of having built this career for 20 years and suddenly starting from not zero, but, close to, with something completely new and not having that financial security or that safety net, that was really scary for me. And so when I started to see some articles that were starting to talk about this freelance general counsel model, particularly in the States, and the fact that it was starting to move into other countries, that sparked a light bulb in my mind. And I was like,
Yeah,
why do I need to do one thing? I can do multiple things, and exactly as you said, it's exactly how I describe what I'm doing. I have this analogy where I talk about, the foundations of, say, a Lego building, right? Like where you kind of build the frame. The legal work for me is that frame. And then everything else, like all the other stuff I'm doing, is the stuff that makes it special and unique, right? And that's the bit that's kind of like the passion, the creativity, you know, exploring different things. It's all the things that you put inside the frame. It's all the stuff that you put on the outside to make it look amazing, right? And that's exactly what having this base has allowed me to do. It's allowed me to say, okay, I can keep doing that. And who knows, it could be forever, or it could be for a period of time.
yeah,
And in the meantime, I can explore what this other side looks like. And that way, do you know what? It's pretty safe. Like I'm exploring with the safety that if things don't work out, or if I realize that actual decide that entrepreneurship isn't for me, I can always go back. And this is the other thing I think that's really important. I think people kind of feel that when they're making these decisions, it has to be a really big, life-changing
right.
decision where you're like, oh my God, I'm leaving behind everything that I've ever done before. And I'm starting something completely new. So I'm going to be forgetting everything from before. That's not the case, right? Like, you don't just lose all that experience that you've had before. And I think the fabulous thing with going into something like entrepreneurship is that these are skills that corporates want their employees to have. So what better if things didn't work out, which hopefully they do, but if they didn't, what better than being able to go to an employer, prospective employer, and say, do you know what? I've also tried my hand at owning my own businesses. These are the things I've learned. These are the skills I've built. Fabulous.
I,
Right?
I couldn't agree more, right? Like it's one of these things where, you spend time in enterprises and they wish they were more entrepreneurial, and it was, a lot of this resonates as well. I often felt when I was starting my own business as well, I was like, I had all those nervousnesses and anxieties of it's what if it goes wrong and I'll never have another job again, and what if I fail and people will never hire me. But as you just shared as well, someone was kind enough to share that advice with me too. It's just like, what is a better development experience than trying to start and grow your own business? Like there's no other experience in the world like it, and it stands to you, as you say, over the course of time. So yeah, another great reason to encourage people to try. So for you then as well, like you mentioned you learned a little bit about Nobody via the fantastic Seychelles, our chief culture officer, who also shares a little bit of a similar story. As she worked as an employment lawyer, and so maybe you all just hang out at employer and lawyer conferences and talk about starting businesses together. I don't know. But share a little bit about how you found Nobody and, just some of your experiences so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sejal and I had been connected probably for about a year, maybe a bit longer, before she first started mentioning Nobody Studios to me. And so we'd just clicked. Like there was just this instantaneous, you get me, I get you, we're on the same page, we want the same things, we want the same type of change in the world. And so we just really got on really well. And then so when she started talking to me about Nobody Studios, she reached out and she said, I think you would be great with, I think it would be fantastic if you jumped on board. Like this is, it's all about, I guess, allowing the most people possible to really be involved in the process of not only launching new companies, but also ideating, which is pretty exciting, right? And so when she said that to me, I was like, oh, this sounds amazing. And it's completely unlike anything I'd ever heard about before. And I think this is, there are a lot of, some issues, I think, with traditional venture capital studios. And one of the things I'd been exploring around the same time with someone that I know quite well is, the access to venture capital that certain parts of society have. So more marginalized communities, right, in terms of investment and that access to people who can help their dreams come true. And so this kind of came around the same sort of time. And I was like, there are a lot of dots here that are kind of starting to connect. And yeah, so that was really the start of my journey with Nobody Studios. And look, I have to be honest, with all that's happened over the last year in terms of leaving corporate employment, starting two businesses, exploring what's out there, it's been a pretty hectic year. So I can't say I've been as hands-on as I might have wanted to be. But, now that things are starting to sort of fall into place a little bit more, I feel like, that opportunity is just around the corner.
Yeah. And, I think this is really important part of it, right? Like part of it is just being part of our community, right? As somebody who can cheer us on, can have the contribute when you have the time and capacity, but you're part of it, right? You're part of this, this group of people who are backing a future that they believe in, that has more a diverse sets of people involved, where more voices can be heard, where people can have ideas and have a place to bring them and see how they go, right? Like that's part of the magic of what we're trying to create here, is that anyone literally can be an investor in this company now with our crowdfunding. Yeah. You don't have to be a high net worth individual. You literally can have a couple of $100 and you can become a venture investor at Nobody. And I think it's one of the things we're most proud of, is creating social mobility for folks who can be part of this system, to your point, which many people have been marginalized from in the past or unknown how to get involved in. And that's one of the things I think is really unique and exciting about what we're doing.
100%. I think it's brilliant. Like, I think the fact that anyone, can invest in the studio and can be part of this journey, I think is phenomenal. And you're right, it's not something that typically is accessible to people or that people know how to access. And I think that's part of the issue that we have in this space too, is the information divide, almost, let's call it. And so I think it's great that we now have, Nobody Studios trying to bridge that divide and trying to expand, I guess, the base of people that have access to investing, and not just investing, but to ideating and, being part of something different.
So looking ahead then, what are some of the things you're most excited about? How we're going to get you to contribute even more to the studio now that you have like 1% more capacity in your pocket?
Yeah, look, I think for me, if I think about the change that I want to see in the world, for me, it's all about driving towards equity and driving inclusion. And so for me, any, I guess, ideas, anything that's coming up in Nobody Studios that really talks to that is where my passion lies. And so I think that's the brilliant thing, right? Like, you can bring the things that you really care about, whatever they are, and you can find that within the studio. And for me, that's the opportunity. Like, that would be the space that I really want to explore, is getting involved in projects, in ventures that are looking to really create some social change in the world. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, well, that's what we're here to do. And so for anyone listening out there who's got ideas, please, by all means, bring them to us. If you haven't seen Min and Kiara's show on our Idea Lab, I'd highly recommend you check that out. They're on every Tuesday to share. Oh, there's Min even throwing in a comment to us, right? So Min, well, let's bring up Min's quote here, who runs and leads our Idea Lab with Kiara. Loved hearing your journey, Niti, and your why, which I think is always so passionate for people. Driving towards equity and inclusion is something, it's really part of our mission. And it's lovely to hear more people sort of sharing that within the company and what we're trying to do. And I think it can't be stated enough, right? Like, seeing great leaders like yourself out there sharing your story, what inspires you in just your daily life, and to take these sort of bold decisions, if you will, to really pivot your own career and what you're doing, is really powerful for people, and I think that's, hopefully we're only going to create more and more of a platform for people to feel like there's a place that they can do that they can explore their intellectual curiosity and bring or test out some of these ideas by sending Min an email if they want. And he's got the joy of working through the Idea Lab and trying to bring these things to life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, I hear it quite often with people that I'm coaching, where they sort of talk about this idea of, looking at other people and what they're doing, especially through your LinkedIn feed, where you see a lot of people doing all these amazing things, right? And they're like, oh, I wish. And I'm like, well, you don't have to wish, right? Like, you don't have to, as I said before, throw all your eggs into one basket. Like, look at what the opportunities are that are out there and find those things that really speak to you. And something like this, as you said, you can be as involved or not involved as you want to be, right? If all you want to do is invest, that's fine too, right? So it gives people that opportunity to do something that's a little bit different, and explore that side of themselves, where perhaps they might otherwise be feeling a little bit kind of stuck.
I think that is a perfect note to end on, and recognizing people that's what we're here to do, is give people the opportunity to be as active as they want, to contribute how they want, and hopefully bring some of their ideas to life in this venture studio that we're trying to build. Niti, it's been amazing to have you on the show. No doubt we'll have you back in the future to share more of your fantastic journey and the lessons you learn along the way. Thank you very much for joining us. And again, happy Australia Day.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Barry.